Hello, thanks again for tuning in to the Jeggett podcast. The Herald, a failing unionist newspaper in Scotland, has managed to get right under my skin. I don't usually read the Herald past the headlines, as it's not much more than a dog-whistling clickbait rag, but sometimes its crap-posting nonsense has to be called out. Headline: Food sent to migrants off Sicily as Italy awaits EU offers. The article rightly describes the Italian Interior Minister Matteo Salvini as the leader of Italy's right-wing Lega party, naming it as part of the country's populist coalition government. We're meant to read this as an indictment. The right-wing and populism aren't good things, so far so good. We're scandalised by Italy's right-wing populist government with its outrageous treatment of immigrants, its Gestapo-like Roma register, and its shameless refusal to take in refugees making the desperate and perilous journey across the Mediterranean. Things aren't good in Italy. But let's get back to that headline. Food sent to migrants. Migrants. Since when were these people migrants? I'm a migrant. Back in the 90s I came to Ireland from Scotland to work during the economic boom. I came by train. I crossed from Stranraer to Belfast on the ferry. Like every other migrant coming to Ireland at that time, I never ran the risk of drowning in the Irish Sea. While the Herald slates the right-wing populism of Salvini and the Lega party, it's playing the exact same game here by deliberately misrepresenting people who have been displaced by war, famine and poverty as economic migrants. Sure, it's left the economic element out, but that's the magic of the dog whistle. It's a coded method of communication intended to be picked up by readers eager to see stricter limits imposed on refugees and asylum seekers here. When these papers, and the Herald is one of many right-leaning papers doing the exact same thing, speak of immigration and migrants, they're not talking about me. At the height of the refugee crisis, I travelled overland from Dublin to Brussels, a journey on which I saw black and brown people in cages on both sides of the channel, with an out-of-date passport. No one wanted to stop me. I'm white. I'm European. Controls on immigration is code for keeping Africans and Muslims out, pure and simple. And this is what the Herald is saying when it describes people as migrants in this article. In the 2 years after the death of baby Alan Kurdi, it was reported that at least 8,500 people fleeing war in the Middle East had died trying to make their way to Europe. Alan Kurdi was not the only infant to be washed up on European and Turkish shores. He wasn't coming to Europe for economic reasons. He wasn't a migrant in any real or meaningful sense. Migrants die. I could have died on my way to Dublin. I could have, but that would have been the exception. Refugees die with shocking regularity. They live through dangers unknown to migrants. They drown, they die of illness, injuries, hunger, thirst, exposure, and violence on their journeys. Criminal gangs from all over Europe and Russia target them as a source of exploitable slave labour and kidnap women and children for sale in the illicit sex trade in underground markets from London to Moscow. David Leask, a professional troll who passes himself off as a journalist for the Herald, is outspoken when it comes to defending the honour of his paper and its magic abilities of fact-checking and correcting mistakes. We have to hand it to him and the whole substandard team at the Herald. They're good with the facts. When it comes to the production of alternative facts in Scotland, there are few mainstream outlets as talented as the Herald. So let's see if they can correct this mistake. As always, thanks for listening to the Jeggett podcast. I'm off, but as always, do take a look at the Patreon page. I could always do with that wee bit more support. Thanks for listening and thanks for all your support. Cheery bye for now.